Brilliant. So welcome to course rep training for Falmouth University. Yes, it's great to meet you all. This is a bit of an odd session because obviously, as we've learned, some of you are online students who are studying in various different parts of the world, and some of you are foundation year students or postgraduate students who are studying right here in Cornwall. So it's an interesting mix of students. So just please be mindful as we go through that everyone here has very different experiences of studying with Falmouth University and higher education in general. The reason why this is such an interesting mix of everyone is because even though you all have very different degrees, you're all using the same rep system. And it was just quite simply easier for me to train you all at once than to do lots of tiny sessions with tiny groups of students. So, yes, there's no such thing as a silly question. As I said, you can ask questions in the chat throughout the presentation, and I'll try to get to as many as possible as I go. But if I miss them, I'll leave time to answer questions at the end of the presentation as well, and you can talk to me at the end of the presentation if you would like. And yes, if there is any way that these sessions can be made more accessible to you, let me know. There should be a transcription going on right now. I'm not entirely sure how to use Teams for accessibility purposes, but I'm trying my best. And also in future, if there's ways that the SU can be made, like sessions with us can be made more accessible to you, happy to talk about it, happy to be made aware of that sort of stuff, so that when we next do any meetings or sessions with you, reps, we can accommodate for that. Cool, brilliant. So the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that as course reps, you are part of the Students' Union, and the Students' Union is a charity organisation run by students for students. So essentially, in your role, you operate as a union representative and you represent the views of students on your course. In the same way, for instance, that the UCU, which is the Union for Lecturers and Academics at Universities, will have different branches, and each branch will have a union representative. You are essentially doing that for each course at Falmouth University, and then your Falmouth president, who I'll talk about in a minute, is your like big boy union representative. Yes, obviously you operate differently to students' unions, operate differently to trade unions. It's not an exact comparison, but it's a good comparison to work with. Yes, you empower students on your course to make changes and improve the student experience. You are the SU. I have had quite a few conversations with students where they have suggested to me or talked to me about the students' union in a way of how is the students' union going to like help us? What does the students' union do for us? Not really realizing that they are the students' union. We can only really make decisions based on what you guys want us to do. We can't do anything without you guys asking us to do it first, and we always want you guys to have an input in that. It's not just you say, oh, can you put on an event, please? And we do it. You're involved in the planning process. You're involved in the organising. If that makes sense, I hope that makes sense. So yeah, you are the students' union. You are students' union representatives. Yes, cool. So, as I mentioned, you have a president Falmouth who is a representative of all Falmouth students and their academic interests. But you also have more presidents. They make up your sabbatical officer team. This team is made up of a bunch of either students who are actually studying but have taken time out of their studies to do the role, or students who have recently graduated and then gone on to do the role. And they're elected in every year by other students. Yes, and then they take out a year and do like a full-time paid job representing you guys to the universities. So your key contact will be Hannah in the green jumper. She is the Falmouth president, represents your academic interests. So good point of contact for you guys if you come up against any feedback that you think is a wider university issue or needs to be addressed at a higher level than just your core staff. She's also got her own projects that she's working on. You're welcome to go on her website and look at her manifesto and see what she's getting up to and what she plans to change this year or introduce to the university. There are also two vice presidents, Phil and Orestes, who represent the whole Students' Union membership. So our Students' Union is the Falmouth and Exeter Students' Union, and we represent all Falmouth University students wherever they are, but also any Exeter students studying in Cornwall specifically. So that's the membership that Phil and Orestes cover. That's quite a lot of students. Phil's focus is on sustainability and climate activism, and Orestes' focus is a bit more on student well-being, particularly related to international students and LGBTQ students, but also any underrepresented groups he's obviously happy to support. So yeah, if you come across any feedback that you think is relevant to those guys, but perhaps less academic based, and again, impacting the wider university, you're welcome to discuss that with them. You're welcome to email them anytime. As you can see, their email is on the slide. And they have an Instagram account where they will post updates about their progress on their manifestos or what they're getting up to, or what's going on in the SU. So if you're interested in seeing sort of casual updates about that, you can follow them on Instagram, and you can also message them on Instagram if you'd like. If that's your thing. Cool. At Students' Union, course reps are part of the Student Voice team. So you guys are under the Student Voice team. I am your main point of contact as a full-time staff member. My name is Penny. Hello, hi. I always introduce myself really late in these presentations. But yes, so I'm the Student Voice Coordinator for Falmouth. I train all of the Falmouth reps and support you guys in collecting feedback, taking feedback to your SSLGs, any unresolved feedback that you think the SU can help with. Any questions or queries you have throughout your year of being a rep, you can come and talk to me. The difference between me and Hannah is that Hannah can take your feedback to high up meetings with the Vice Chancellor that are all very important and fancy. I can't do that because I have no representative power, but I can answer the menial day-to-day questions about where am I supposed to submit feedback, or like what ideas you have for collecting feedback. I can do that kind of stuff. So any little niggling questions that you have, send them to me. Cool. We also have another voice coordinator called Leslie. She's lovely. She focuses on the wider student community, so not anything academic specific, but will support with any networks for underrepresented groups. So we have a mature students network and so on and so forth that she'll support with. And she also supports our student council. So that's kind of what Leslie does. If you're interested in doing any sort of community building stuff, she's a point of contact for that. And we also have Matt, who is the student voice manager. You'll likely get emails from him if I am ill or on holiday. If you want to contact us, our generic email or our shared email is studentvoice@thesu.org.uk. It's a good email to contact if you just can't seem to reach me, as someone else in the team can pick up your email and get in touch with you. Cool. So I'm just going to take a drink and I'll get into the actual course rep role. If anyone has any questions about the SU or what the SU does, feel free to shoot them in chat. But I'm going to assume, because I can't see any messages so far, that you're all okay, and that's great. So the course rep role, you represent all students in your course year group. You work with your course leader and the other reps in your year group / on your course to resolve issues on your course and ensure students on your course are being authentically represented. That's very wordy. There is at least one rep in every year group of every course. If you're a foundation year student or an MA student, it's likely that you're probably only here for 1 year, so you are the rep. Great, that's cool. If you're an undergraduate student, you may have at least 2 or 3 years. So there'll be if you're in first year, there might be a second year rep above you, and there might even be a third year rep above you. Yes, so you work primarily with your course leader and other course staff to talk about course feedback and academic feedback, but you may also have opportunities to work with the SU to represent your course mates' opinions on wider university issues. So sometimes we organise focus groups on issues and we invite reps along with the intention of you guys representing the opinion of your specific course cohort at those meetings. So not just like, oh, what do you think about cost of living and like how it's impacting students, but what do you and the people studying your course think? So yeah, you're used both in the student union context and the university context. The key part of your job is attending student staff liaison groups, which we shorten to SSLGs. That's a very fancy name for a meeting that is essentially just a meeting between you and your course leader about any feedback on your course that students have, any issues mainly, or new ideas that you have for your course, but also anything that's going well and you want them to keep doing. These meetings, SSLGs, are always attended by your course leader and your admin team, because your admin team are there to manage it. But they may also be attended by stores staff or facility staff if you're on campus, but also library staff or wider academic support staff. So anyone involved in IT might be there to talk about issues. And also other lecturers on your course may go. It doesn't just have to be your course leader, it might be your year group leader. So yes, the important thing to note is that they are always going to be with your course leader. These meetings take place once a term and are organised by your department admin. So you're looking out for an email from them, not me or the SU. You're looking out for an email from whoever your department admin is. And they will normally send you a calendar invite. So let them know as soon as possible. If you can't attend the meeting, RSVP, decline the invite, just let them know so they can be aware if who's able to give feedback. Okay, so I'm going to go through a quick list of meeting terminology, but before I do, is anyone familiar with what any of the terms on this PowerPoint mean? If you do, feel free to throw some definitions into the chat. And whilst you do that, I'm going to take a drink of water. Cool. Thanks, Rowan. Yeah, so minutes, recording what's being said, pretty much. I will go through the official fancy definitions in a minute, but that's pretty much spot on. Apologies if you can't go. Yeah, apologies. I can't go to this meeting. Yeah, cool, great. Agenda, what will be discussed in the meeting, the overall plan / outline for the meeting. Yep, agenda item, one of the topics in the meeting. Yep, you guys know this stuff. You've got this. Cool. No one's mentioned what the chair is, but I think I will go through them anyways. Oh, chair, the board. Interesting. The chair of the meeting is the person who controls the conduct of the meeting. So basically, whoever's welcoming everyone in, going through the apologies, which we'll get to later, going through the agenda, so on and so forth. Normally, this is your course leader, because you will submit feedback, and they will use that feedback to make the agenda, and then they'll go through the agenda. Most likely, they're normally not very complicated. Most likely, it's first year creative writing, what feedback do you have to share? Okay, great. Second year creative writing, what feedback do you have to share? It's not normally particularly complex, but sometimes they like to add things themselves. So yes, the chair of the meeting is the person who controls the meeting, normally your course leader. The agenda, the plan for a meeting, and it's the items to be discussed in the order in which they will be discussed. So as I don't want to mispronounce your name, Isha or Aisha, said in the chat, yeah, pretty much exactly got it spot on. As I said, the agenda that staff normally do isn't too complex, but it's really helpful for them to see your feedback, have your feedback in good time before the meeting, so that they can actually review it, take it in and come up with a plan and respond to it, basically. So that's why you need to submit early so they can turn it into an agenda. On the topic, the agenda item is a topic of discussion in the agenda. I sometimes refer to these as feedback items because they are made up of your feedback. So again, it's important for you to submit feedback early before SSLGs and not the day of an SSLG meeting, so that the feedback can be turned into an agenda item and put onto the agenda. Cool. Apologies, yes, formal notifications of inability to attend a meeting. Basically, it's just you saying, sorry, I can't attend for XYZ reason. Normally they'll go through at the start of the meeting just to clarify who isn't able to attend. If you aren't able to attend an SSLG meeting, that doesn't mean you can't submit feedback to it. It just means that you won't be there to talk through the feedback. So either make sure a fellow rep on your course is able to do that, or if none of you can attend in your year group, just make sure that the feedback you submit is comprehensive enough for them to know what you're trying to communicate. Cool. So actions are tasks that need to be completed to achieve a goal / resolve an item of feedback. Actions are essentially the whole reason why we do SSLGs in the first place, because you go to a meeting with a feedback item saying, hey, this is a problem that's come up on our course, and then staff respond with an action to say, okay, this is how we plan to solve that problem. It's really important for you guys as reps to take whatever action staff plan out and communicate it to your course mates and say, oh, so just so you know, we took this feedback to the SSLG meeting. Staff said they'll do this in response, and then you guys can hold them accountable for whether or not they do actually do what they said they were going to do, if that makes sense. Actions, another reason why it's important for you to submit feedback ahead of time or in good time is that it gives staff time to consider your feedback and come up with some actions to respond to your feedback with. So yes, I recommend that. I'll probably talk about this later again, but I recommend that you submit feedback for SSLGs at least a week in advance, so that it gives staff time to consider what you've said and how they can respond to it. Brilliant, cool. Minutes. As has been said, these are the notes taken during a meeting that serve as an official / formal document of key points covered. Official minutes for SSLG meetings will be done by your department admin, so you don't need to worry about noting literally everything down because there's an admin person there to do that. However, it is important for you to note down any actions that are made in response to the feedback that you bring for your course year group, especially if the actions in question are ones that you're responsible for. So SSLGs aren't necessarily just a you bring feedback, staff solve the problem situation. You guys can also be brought in to help with solving the problems. And that might just be, often it's that you guys are given an action to communicate information to your course mates about how problems are going to be solved, or any information that you might have missed. So yeah, there are going to sometimes be times where your course leaders ask you guys to help out a little bit. So make note of that. It's always useful to make note of. Yes, also it's a fun bit of, important bit of context that helps contextualize how SSLGs work. Sometimes the meeting minutes for SSLGs are actually taken by course staff or any staff in those meetings to wider university meetings that students aren't in. So it's a great way. These meetings are a way for you guys to get your student voice heard, and the minutes of those meetings can then get taken to higher up meetings to sort of go, oh, well, we know how students feel about this issue because we were in this SSLG and this is what they said to us. That's not something you need to worry about or stress about. I just like to tell reps that that's the thing that happens so that you know how these meetings sit in university decision-making meetings. Yes, so does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Just puts it into context that these meetings can actually be quite important for making change at the universities. And the final thing, AOB, stands for any other business, and that's usually the last agenda item in an agenda. It provides an opportunity for attendees to suggest additional matters for discussion. So if there's anything that, if there is bits of feedback that you weren't able to submit in time to put on the agenda, you may have time at the end of the meeting to be like, oh, by the way, this has also happened. Can we discuss it before the meeting ends? That's what any other business is for. Normally you won't need this because you'll be given time to talk about most of your feedback anyways, but just so you have full clarity of what we're talking about when we're talking about meeting terminology. Cool. So the meetings that you attend as reps, the key one obviously is student staff liaison groups, but you may also attend informal meetings and catch-ups with your university staff. I've put e.g. heads of subject, but it's not heads of subject, it's course staff and course leaders. Sorry for the typo. And you may also attend informal meetings with SU staff, so myself and the founder president. Again, we might run focus groups to get feedback from you for reports and so on and so forth. Also, if you're an on-campus student, you may be invited to the SU's Big Rep meeting. This is an opportunity for University of Exeter Cornwall and Falmouth University reps who are on Falmouth or Penryn campuses to discuss issues impacting students across those campuses. It normally discusses things like the spaces on campus and shared facilities and so on and so forth. So that's also coming up potentially in November. Yes, but again, that's an optional meeting. The key important meeting that you have to go to, all of you, is SSLGs. Meeting etiquette. So just a few things that we'd like you to remember in relation to your role to make sure that you're doing proper conduct, I suppose. For the meeting, make sure you're checking your emails regularly. Your university emails, the only way that the universities can really contact you about this sort of stuff is through university emails due to like data protection. I can only really contact you through university emails. I know some of you will have personal emails that you use more often, but please check your university emails. And RSVP to email invites, because it helps the meeting organisers know whether or not you can make a meeting and actually attend. It's a way of giving your apologies, essentially. Submit your feedback in a timely manner in advance of each meeting. I've already talked to you about that. So yes, submit to SSLGs at least a week in advance. Familiarise yourself with feedback you intend to discuss. Yeah, so anything you plan to talk about in the meeting, make sure you know what you're talking about ahead of time, and you know what you're going to say, which is fairly self-explanatory. During the meeting, be punctual, make sure you turn up on time, don't talk over others, and make sure you allow everyone a chance to talk, and make notes of any actions decided on in response to your feedback, especially if you're responsible for them. And finally, after the meeting, make sure you feedback to your course cohort about what was discussed and any agreed actions. This helps your course mates know what SSLGs are doing and how SSLGs are helping them make any changes to their course that they want to see. And it also helps them, as I said, hold staff accountable for those changes. They can see when their feedback is being listened to and when it's not being listened to. Okay, so how do I submit feedback to SSLGs? You guys submit feedback to SSLGs via the online SSLG tool. It's essentially a Microsoft form that allows you to submit one feedback item at a time. And when you submit an item of feedback, it's added to a live agenda on your SSLG SharePoint page. I can't give you a link to the SharePoint pages, but I can give you a link to the form to give you an idea of what it looks like. And I will do that now. One moment. So that should open a Microsoft form that invites you to say which department you're part of and what course in that department you are submitting feedback for. If you are unfamiliar with what department you belong to, simply send a quick email to your course leaders and they'll be able to point you in the right direction. If you're an integrated foundation year student, there's not going to be your specific pathway listed as a course. It's just going to say integrated foundation year. And if you're an integrated foundation year student and you don't know this, you are part of Falmouth School of Art, regardless of what you're studying. So it might seem like you'd be part of Institute of Photography if you're studying a foundation photography degree, but actually you're still part of Falmouth School of Art. If anyone has any questions or queries or concerns about that form, just shoot me an email. I'm happy to work it out with you. It's no stress. So yes, when you submit feedback through the form, you do have to do it with one item of feedback at a time. You can't submit all of them at once, which is really annoying, but that is because it gets put onto a live agenda on your SSLG SharePoint page. And then from that agenda, your course leaders can plan the meeting and lead the meeting. It's useful to bookmark that form for future reference, because sometimes it can get lost. Also, if you can't find a link to it and need a link to it, you can always email me or your department admin, and we'll get you a link so you can submit feedback. Don't worry too much. Yes, and as I keep saying, please submit feedback a week in advance. Thank you. Cool. So in terms of what feedback you should bring to an SSLG, they are specifically academic related spaces. So you're there to discuss anything around your course or wider academic experience. So anything to do with teaching, for example, anything to do with the course and module content on your course that you have feedback about, that's great. That's perfect for SSLGs. Equally, any timetabling issues and concerns, unless those concerns are urgent, which we'll get to later, they're worth discussing. Any learning resources, so anything to do with the library resources that you have, or IT resources are worth discussing in SSLGs. How helpful assessment and the feedback you get from assessments are useful to talk about. Personal tutoring is also worth mentioning. Student-led projects and events. You may already be running, depends on the nature of your course, they may already be encouraging you to put on academic-related events as students, so you may want to discuss those in SSLGs. If they're not, and you would like to, I strongly encourage, if that's something you're interested in, to get in touch with me or your course staff, and we can, essentially, the course rep role at its core is about representing students' voices through gathering feedback and writing up feedback, and coming up with actions to respond to feedback. However, if you're up for doing a little bit more and you'd like to do some events with your other course mates, you can, that can be facilitated. There's no reason why it can't be. But if you have any questions or queries about that, you're welcome to get in touch with me at the SU. And I can point you in the right direction, or just get in touch with your course leader and ask, hey, would you mind helping me? You might want to put on study groups for your course mates to like go through any learning resources, or even just really sort of like relaxing socials. It doesn't have to be too serious, as long as it's well, as long as you want to do it, essentially. So yes, that's what we mean by student-led projects and events. And you can also talk in SSLGs about the overall effectiveness of SSLGs and the actions of the department and the SU in response to it, which essentially means, at its core, if you go to an SSLG and you say, hey, we want more books in the library, and your staff say, yeah, we'll get you more library resources. And then by the next SSLG, you know they haven't done that. There's no more, like, it's exactly the same. You can say, hey, we talked about it in the last SSLG and nothing's changed. Why is that? Why has that happened? Yeah, that's a way for you to talk about how effective the SSLGs actually are in response to your feedback. When you bring the SU into it, it gets a little bit murky because, as I said, you guys are the SU, but equally, if you have feedback for us specifically that you want us to respond to, and you feel like we're not responding to it in a timely manner, you can also talk to us about it. That's absolutely fine. There is some feedback, as I mentioned earlier, that shouldn't go to SSLGs for various reasons. So if your feedback, the feedback that you're being given from your course mates is time sensitive and needs to be solved urgently, you should really direct it to an informal conversation with your course leader. So for example, if a student says, oh, a lot of us are struggling to log on to the portal that we need to use to submit our work for assessment and marking, you don't need to wait for an SSLG to address something like that. You are within your right to arrange a meeting with your course leader to say, hey, we're unable to access this, we need to fix this. That's absolutely fine. Equally, there may be some issues that come up in feedback that are good to address with your course leader directly because they're easy to solve. I will leave it up to your discretion what that might look like because it's different for each course. But yeah, there are some issues that you might think, I don't need to wait weeks and weeks for a termly meeting to address this. I can just shoot my course leader an email, arrange a meeting, and we can talk about it then. And that's okay. You are within your right to arrange meetings with your course leaders whenever you feel you need them. Hopefully they'll be checking with you anyways. But yeah, don't feel scared to ask. course staff for meetings, essentially. Yes, and non-academic issues. So any feedback that's on anything that's not really academic. So a lot of them are on campus issues like accommodation, parking, non-academic events. Your core staff don't work in these departments. They aren't responsible for these events, so it's difficult for them to action this feedback. And so there's other avenues for that kind of feedback, which I will talk about in a minute. I feel like online students, you'll probably get less of that because a lot of your degree is that academic experience, but equally, you can also use these avenues as well. So if you get any feedback that isn't academic, there are other avenues you can go for. One of which is make a change, which I dub the student union's equivalent to change.org. It's essentially like a survey. So if a student has an idea for something that they can change that impacts the wider university, they can submit the idea and make a change. And then if it gets enough upvotes from students and has more upvotes than downvotes, it then will be taken to the SU Student Council, who will vote on it again as representatives of the wider university. And then they can, if it's voted for as a mandate for the SU, we can lobby for change and campaign on it. It's in like our rules to lobby for change. I'll send a link to that page so you can get familiar with it if you'd like. Other ways that you can address this feedback, as I said, informal meetings with core staff. It's good for any urgent or time-sensitive problems, any problems that you can solve easily. Don't be afraid to ask core staff for meetings to address things if you need to. And you can also discuss any non-academic feedback at any time with your SU sabbatical officers and student voice team. So I put up our emails earlier. Yes, you can email the presidents at any time if you have any feedback that you don't think directly relates to your course or is perhaps bigger than your course and affects a lot of students. You may want to address it with them. And you can also address it with my team and we can try and chase it up for you. That's also an option. So when you're gathering feedback, there are two types of key feedback you can gather. There's quantitative feedback and qualitative feedback. Quantitative feedback is useful to demonstrate that the opinions you're sharing and the feedback you're collecting is like shared by the majority of students on your course. It's really important to be a good representative, that you're making sure the feedback you gather is actually representative of most people. So yeah, quantitative feedback even, examples of that might be saying 9 out of 10 students agree that this lecture was really good, or 60% of students feel that we could have more information on this subject, for instance. Qualitative feedback, aka words, helps to illustrate the specific issue that you're trying to address, how students are feeling about it, how it's impacting them, how they might like it to be resolved. Yeah, it's fairly self-explanatory. Both are important. Having a balance of both is really useful. So try to aim to collect both of them when you're collecting feedback from your course mates. There are different ways to gather feedback from students, obviously. If anyone has any ways that they've sort of collected feedback from fellow students, or even in any context where you need to gather feedback in the past that have worked well for them or perhaps haven't worked well for them, feel free to share them in the chat. Some suggestions from me are that things like, a lot of you will probably already have course group chats where you talk to other students on your course. That's a good place to share any information, particularly links. Links to online surveys are really good. Their online surveys are great because students can fill them in their own time. You don't have to catch people in a live session to do it. They can do it whenever they have a free moment. There are also some ways, some group chats I feel can facilitate polls, but not all of them. So that's up to whatever platform you're using. Shout outs in lectures can be quite good, especially if there are certain people on your course who you don't really talk to very much or aren't very responsive to group chats. It may be that the easiest way for you to do that is at the start of a lecture or even at the end of a lecture, you ask your lecturer who's running the session if you can just take 5 minutes to ask students some quick questions, particularly doing things like raise your hand if you feel this way or that way. That's a quick way to get some information from students. If you're on campus, notice boards around campus are quite good. You can also always run catch-ups or drop-ins, either by taking over a space in a cafe or online. You might just want to set up a team meeting that anyone can drop into. And yes, you can always send emails to your year group via your university email. That's always an option for gathering feedback from students and letting people know that you're looking for feedback. Things to remember when you're gathering feedback: avoid asking leading questions. Any questions that are essentially read as though you're coaxing a response from students. This shouldn't put you off asking feedback about issues that you're aware of, if that makes sense. So if you're aware that you've just done a module or a lecture that students weren't very impressed with, you're welcome. I encourage you to use your initiative and maybe shape your feedback questions around that. It will actually help to make your feedback more specific. However, what you need to be careful of is how you phrase that question. So instead of saying, oh, lecture was crap, that's implying that everyone thought the lecture was crap, which isn't necessarily true. But if you say, what did you think of the lecture we had last week? That allows people to say, if it's as you thought and everyone thought it was terrible, they can go, oh yeah, it was really bad. Or they might say, actually, I really enjoyed it. And you'll be pleasantly surprised that not everyone feels the way you thought. So yes, if that makes sense, you can curate your feedback questions, but just make sure that you're not leading them into a response that you think they're going to give. And also make sure your feedback considers the perspectives of the whole course cohort, not that just those closest to you. This is really difficult, and I really understand why reps fall into this trap, but just make sure you're not you're varying where you get your feedback from, and you aren't just talking to your friends and also the people who you're normally with in lectures and seminars. Make sure you're trying to reach students you don't talk to very often as well. If you have a big year group, you can ask your lecturers for support with collecting feedback from students you may not have seminars or lectures with. And online students, I can understand that it may be hard for you to catch all students in a live session due to conflicting schedules. So you could ask your lecturers for space on any digital platforms you use in class to promote yourself and how students can send you feedback. I'm not entirely sure of the platforms that Falmouth University uses for online students. I think that's one called Canvas. But I think it's within your right to ask about that stuff. Yeah, Teams and Canvas, cool. So yes, you could make a Teams group chat with all the students on your course. That might work. And you can also ask your lecturer. You can send your lecturers information that they can then put on Canvas of here are who your reps are. This is a form that you can fill in to give some feedback, so on and so forth. Equally for on-campus students. Online students should be able to create a forum on campus. Brilliant, that's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. For on-campus students as well, for your digital platform, the learning space, if you ask your course leader or lecturers to put stuff on the learning space, they will probably be obliging of that. And if they say no, they probably have a good reason. So yeah, if you want to have a little space on your digital platforms to be like, this is the rep space, this is the space for student reps, that's totally cool. Brilliant. Okay, how to present your feedback effectively. When you are presenting and writing up feedback for SSOTs, you just need to remember that it should be following the ABCDEs of feedback. So accurate and appropriate. It needs to be what students actually said. Yeah, it needs to be accurate to what students have actually said to you in the feedback you've been given. Balanced. It's good to seek to understand the experiences of students from different backgrounds and try different approaches to enable all students to feel comfortable in sharing their views about the course. I said earlier that as a representative, it's really important for you to represent the majority opinion of students because that's what's most pressing to all students. However, sometimes you may get feedback from underrepresented groups that is about their experience as an underrepresented group. For instance, you might get feedback from some disabled students or mature students or students of colour about their experience in that space. That's equally important to represent And in that situation, we follow a policy of majority rules, minority rights, which essentially means that the majority of students or policy and rules and feedback is dictated by the opinion of the majority of the course cohort. But that feedback shouldn't inhibit on the rights and on the rights of minority students or students from minority groups. Didn't explain that very well, but essentially, if a minority student says something about their experience that they'd like you to share, you can share it, even if it's just coming from a small group of students, because it's coming from a small group of students who are part of that community. Yes, your feedback should also be constructive. So seek to understand what is going well alongside what could be improved. Essentially, if something isn't going well or is bad, don't just say this is crap. Say this is crap and this is how we suggest you solve it. These are ways that we can make it better. Because remember, your lecturers are humans too. So sometimes if they're just getting negative feedback and no improvements, yeah, that can be hard to work with. Depersonalize. Avoid naming individual students or staff in your feedback. This is because these are public spaces. So if you have any feedback to do with a particular lecturer or relating to particular students, either, if you can, make it anonymous, but if it is about a specific person, don't bring it to SSOGs. Take it to an informal meeting with your course leader instead, or if that person who is of concern is your course leader, a different appropriate member of course staff. Don't take it to SSOGs. And finally, make sure your feedback is evidence. The feedback you've received through, evidence the feedback you've received through statistics or student comments, quantitative and qualitative feedback. Do we plan to collect feedback as a rep group, maybe creating a survey or similar, or do it individually? When you collect feedback, ideally, it's good to work with the other reps in your course year group. So yes, I would try and co-create a survey or something that you can all see the feedback collected on it. When you submit it, only one of you needs to submit a feedback item to the form that I sent, which is kind of awkward in my opinion, but yeah, that's fine. It can be one person's job to do the whole filling in the Microsoft form thing, but yeah, you can work together on collecting feedback and you can work together on contacting students. You don't need to do it individually. I think it's better and your feedback is stronger when you work together, because you can reach more people and you're all on the same page as to what you're bringing to the SSOGs. I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, let me know. Cool. And finally, closing the feedback loop. I've already talked about this, but it's incredibly important that after every meeting, you let your course mates know what feedback was discussed and how staff intend to respond to the feedback. So what actions were agreed by staff, how are they going to respond? You can do this in the same way you may gather feedback. For instance, you can ask to speak about SSOG feedback at the start or end of a lecture, share the feedback by email or group chat, post any updates on notice boards in your department. As we said, online students, you can create a forum on Canvas where you say, hey, this is what we discussed in SSOGs and this is how staff are going to respond. If you have any questions, you can share them there. And on-campus students, same thing. You might want to ask if you can put an update on the learning space or talk about it in a year group meeting, so on and so forth. Yes, you can use the same methods that you use to collect feedback to also respond to feedback. Yes, if students don't know how staff intend to make changes, they can't hold staff accountable for those changes. That's really important. It's closing the feedback loop helps other students see what the point of SSOGs are and why they're so important and whether or not they're effective. And it's okay if an SSOG isn't being effective. That's not necessarily a reflection on you as a rep. It just shows that there's a problem and we need to work through that problem and make sure that the student voice is being listened to appropriately. Okay, that concludes the course rep training in a nutshell. The next steps that you can take are to introduce yourself to your course mates and let them know that you are their course rep. As we mentioned earlier, you may also have other course reps in your year group, so get to know them as well. Maybe start a little chat between yourselves so you can plan out how you're going to introduce yourselves to your course mates, how you're going to start gathering feedback. You can introduce yourself to your other course mates through email, maybe a group chat, or ask for a shout out in a lecture. Other things you need to do, start gathering feedback ahead of your first SSOT and start submitting it to the online feedback tool. You don't need to wait until you've gathered everything to submit feedback. You can start submitting the moment you've got like an item of feedback and you have the evidence to back it up, you can put it through the feedback tool. You don't need to wait for everything you could possibly submit, if that makes sense. If you don't see your course listed on the online SSOT tool, contact your department admin team or your course leader to let them know. Or finally, if you aren't getting anything from them, contact me and I'll chase it up for you. That's only likely to happen if your course is really new, which I know some courses might be starting this year, like afresh. So yes, if you don't see your course because of that, just get in touch. Wonderful. So I'm going to stop this recording and stop sharing my screen, and then if anyone has any questions, I will answer them.